Most people think they know Henry VIII, fat king, 6 wives, chopped off some heads, but the real story, it's way more twisted than that. Let's start with the beginning. Henry wasn't supposed to be king. That job belonged to his older brother Arthur. Henry was the backup, the spare kid, and honestly, he was perfect backup material. Tall, strong, could speak 3 languages before most kids could tie their shoes. The guy could hunt all day, write music at night, and still have energy left. Then 1502 happened. Arthur just died. Some nasty sickness called sweating sickness. Basically like a really bad flu that killed you in hours. Suddenly, 10-year-old Henry went from happy prince to future king of England. Even more shocking, the next year, his mother died in childbirth. Poor Henry went from golden child to traumatized heir in 12 months. Here's where it gets crazy. Henry's dad basically locked him up. Not in a prison, but close enough. No freedom, people watching him all the time, couldn't even hunt without guards following him everywhere. For 7 years. 7 years of being treated like a precious, breakable toy instead of a person. The anger was building up, and when Henry finally became king at 17, he was hungry for everything he'd been denied. His first move as king? Marry Catherine of Aragon. She was his dead brother's wife, 6 years older, and a Spanish princess. Not exactly a love story, but royal marriages rarely were. Catherine was smart, tough, and proved she could run a country when Henry went off to play soldier in France. While he was waving swords around pretending to be a warrior, she crushed the Scottish army and sent him the dead Scottish king's bloody coat as a prize. Talk about showing off. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about royal marriages. They're basically baby-making businesses. Catherine got pregnant over and over, and over and over, the babies died. Dead sons, daughters who lived for days, miscarriages that broke her heart. Only one child lived, Princess Mary, born in 1516. One daughter in 7 years of trying. The weird part? Henry proved he could make healthy boys. In 1519, he had a son with his mistress, Elizabeth Blount. The kid, Henry Fitzroy, was everything a king could want. Strong, smart, perfect in every way, except he wasn't born to the queen. This told Henry the problem wasn't him. It was Catherine. Then along came Anne Boleyn. Now, Anne wasn't the prettiest woman at court, but she had something way more dangerous. Brains and attitude. She'd been educated in France, could argue with priests about religion, and when the King of England started chasing her around, she did something no one had ever done before. She said no. Not to becoming his mistress. She wanted to be queen. For 7 years, she kept Henry waiting like a lovesick teenager. But why? Because Anne understood power. She watched other royal mistresses get used and thrown away. She wanted the crown, not just a spot in the royal bed. And Henry, who'd never been told no in his life, became obsessed. This is where Henry completely lost his mind. When the Pope refused to cancel his marriage to Catherine, Henry did something that shocked all of Europe. He broke away from the Catholic Church completely, created his own church, made himself the boss of it, destroyed 800 monasteries, and stole all their money. Basically told the Pope to go to hell, all for one woman who wouldn't sleep with him. Let's not forget what this cost. Henry killed anyone who disagreed with his break from Rome. We're talking thousands of people. Monks, nobles, even his former best friend Thomas More, all because he wanted to divorce his wife, and the Pope said no. Henry finally married Anne in secret in 1533. She was already pregnant, and when baby Elizabeth was born that same year, Henry convinced himself a boy would come next. Except it didn't. Anne had miscarriage after miscarriage. The woman who'd brought down the Catholic Church couldn't give Henry what he needed most, a son. And the weird part is, once Anne became queen, everything that made Henry fall for her started annoying him. Her smart mouth, her opinions, her refusal to be a quiet, obedient wife. She'd argue with him in public, get mad at his mistresses, act like she was his equal. Pretty revolutionary for a woman in 1535. But Henry wanted a queen who knew her place. But what really changed everything happened in 1536. Henry was jousting at Greenwich Palace, still trying to prove he was the strong warrior from his youth, even though he was now 44 and getting fat. The horse was huge, probably 1,500 pounds. Henry was wearing full armor, another 100 pounds of metal. During the tournament, his horse fell and crashed down on top of him. The crash was terrible. Henry was knocked out for 2 hours, a massive head injury that probably damaged his brain. But worse was his leg. The crushing weight burst open an old wound from another jousting accident years earlier. This time, it didn't heal. In fact, it got infected, and the infection spread to both legs. Well, imagine having open, rotting wounds on your legs that never stopped bleeding and oozing gross stuff. The smell was so horrible that by Henry's last years, people could tell he was coming from rooms away. The pain never stopped, was incredibly bad, and there were no painkillers except alcohol. Henry had to be carried everywhere in special chairs because walking hurt too much. The personality change was immediate and scary. Before the accident, Henry could be mean, but he was also charming, funny, and capable of really caring about people. After, the constant pain turned him into a paranoid monster with an unpredictable temper. Anne Boleyn, who'd married a fun king, now found herself dealing with a man in constant pain who saw enemies everywhere. Then there's what happened later that year. In 1 week, Henry had Anne arrested for supposedly sleeping with 5 different men, including her own brother. The evidence was stupid, confessions forced out through torture, stories that made no sense. But Henry controlled the courts, and Anne was doomed from the moment she annoyed him too much. In 1536, she was beheaded at the Tower of London. She was probably around 35 years old. The truly shocking part? Henry married wife number 3, Jane Seymour, 11 days later. 11 days, not even 2 weeks after ordering his second wife's death, he was celebrating his 3rd wedding. Though honestly, celebrating is generous. By now, Henry could barely walk without wincing. Jane was everything Anne wasn't. Quiet, obedient, pale where Anne was dark, gentle where Anne was fierce. Most importantly, she got pregnant quickly and stayed pregnant. In 1537, after 3 days of labor that nearly killed her, Jane gave birth to Prince Edward. Finally, after 28 years of marriage and countless dead babies, Henry had his legal son and heir. Jane died 12 days later from infection. In a time before modern medicine, having babies was like playing Russian roulette. Henry was genuinely heartbroken. Jane had given him everything and asked for nothing. She was the only wife he truly mourned, and when he died, 10 years later, he chose to be buried next to her. But Henry couldn't stay single for long. England needed allies, and his advisors pushed for a German Protestant princess named Anne of Cleves. Henry agreed based on a flattering painting by Hans Holbein. Big mistake. When Anne arrived in England, Henry took one look and was horrified. He called her the Mare of Flanders behind her back and claimed he found her so ugly he couldn't sleep with her. The wedding happened anyway in 1540, but it was canceled 6 months later. Anne, being smarter than Henry's other wives, agreed to the cancellation, accepted a generous payoff, and lived comfortably in England as the king's beloved sister for the rest of her life. She's the only one of his wives who outlived him. Wife number 5 was Catherine Howard, and this is where Henry's story gets really dark. Catherine was maybe 19 when they married in 1540. Henry was 49, massively overweight, with stinking leg wounds that never healed. The contrast was disgusting. A teenage beauty married to a man who smelled like death and could barely walk. But he was obsessed with her youth and beauty, calling her his rose without a thorn. Catherine had a secret, though. She'd had boyfriends before marriage. Not unusual for a teenager in a noble house with little supervision, but definitely something you should mention to your crazy king husband. When Henry found out in 1541, his rage was made worse by years of constant physical pain. The man, who was already paranoid from chronic pain, became convinced that everyone was laughing at him behind his back. Catherine Howard was executed in 1542. She was so young and scared that guards had to carry her to the chopping block. 2 wives dead in 6 years. The pattern was clear: make Henry VIII mad and you'd lose your head. His final wife, Catherine Parr, was the smartest of all. She was 31, had been married twice before, and knew exactly how dangerous Henry could be. She played the role of caring nurse and stepmother perfectly, even managing to make Henry get along with his daughters Mary and Elizabeth again. Most importantly, she understood that Henry's constant pain made him impossible to predict. She learned to read his moods, knew when the leg wounds were particularly bad, and changed how she acted accordingly. But Catherine nearly died too. In 1546, her Protestant religious views almost got her arrested for heresy. She saved herself by convincing Henry she only talked about religion to distract him from his constant pain, which was actually smart psychology. By his final years, Henry had become a monster in the truest sense. He weighed around 400 pounds, partly because he couldn't exercise due to his ruined legs. His wounds had to be burned regularly with hot metal tools, torture that would make grown men scream. The handsome prince who'd once amazed Europe was now a paranoid tyrant whose own body was rotting from the inside out. The smell was legendary. People at court described the stench of his infected legs as so bad it could clear a room. He had to be moved by special machines and pulleys because his legs couldn't support his massive weight. And through it all, the pain never stopped. Every day, for 11 years, Henry lived with agony that would drive most people crazy. Henry VIII died in 1547 at Whitehall Palace. He was 55 years old. In his final moment, he squeezed Archbishop Cranmer's hand, maybe asking for forgiveness for his 72,000 executions, maybe defying death to the very end. Henry left behind 3 children who would each rule England: the sickly Edward VI, the Catholic Mary I, and the Protestant Elizabeth I. His daughter Elizabeth became one of England's greatest monarchs. Pretty ironic considering Henry had torn the kingdom apart trying to avoid having a woman rule. So yes, Henry VIII killed 2 of his 6 wives, but that barely scratches the surface of his cruelty. The jousting accident that ruined his legs also broke his mind. The Golden Prince who'd promised England a new age of glory had become its most notorious tyrant, driven mad by pain and obsession with having sons. All because sometimes even kings don't get what they want, and when they're in constant pain, they make everyone around them pay for it. If you think Henry VIII's ruthless actions make him one of history's true villains, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. Was he really England's worst king, or just a product of his time? I'd love to hear what you think.